With your host, Andrew Donaldson. This is Heard Tell.
Welcome back to Heard Tell. Okay, we did this last year on the 4th of July. Might make it a tradition. So it's fun on Independence Day to talk to one of our Brit friends, Ben Harris, back on the program once again. Thankfully, not wearing an Aston Villa jersey that he rips on and takes his sweater off right as I press record. Thank you for not doing that, my friend. Welcome back to Heard Tell.
It's out of season. So
is there any such thing for a Villa fan, though? You guys are always hoping for the new day, right?
Yeah. Well, it's I mean, it wasn't too bad last season. We had some ups and downs, but this new season starts in about a month and a half now, so it's not a long way. So we made some good signs though. So I'm quietly confident, but we'll see. That'll probably be obliterated by September.
Yeah, one nice thing about it, being a soccer football fan is the off season is very short, especially in a World Cup year. It's pretty much non-existent, so that's a good thing. All right, buddy.
This year it's I was just to say this year the World Cup is in November, December, so it's really crammed in the middle. It's not usually like that, but it's because it's in Qatar. So
yeah, and we're going to be talking plenty about that when that happens. But by the way, we've got England in the first round, I believe, in the group stage. The U.S.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, so that's going to be.
I think I actually might want America to win because I don't actually like the English football team. If it was rugby, I'd support England any day. But football, I have my reasons.
See, here we go. The hot takes are coming already. We haven't even dug in yet. Okay, it's the 4th of July. We did this last year. For folks that don't know, you've actually done quite a bit of work. You did your university work on the special relationship between England and America. It's pretty unique in world history. We've had England's got a pretty good relationship with most of what used to be the empire, most of the old colonies. They're allies with almost all of them. Talk about for a minute, though, it is pretty unique in the history of the world what America and Britain has done together in the last, 240 odd years, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't think of I can't think of, maybe there is. I'm not an expert in history, but I can't think of any period in history where you've had essentially the world's main superpower peacefully hand over to the next one, which is what we did with the US. I mean, obviously, we were in conflict with the US in the 1700s, early 1800s. But when that handover actually took place, if you could call it a handover, in sort of the late 19th century, early 20th century, it was very peaceful. We were on the same side in the same wars, so it wasn't like great was throats, and usually that doesn't happen.
Is it even comparable? And again, we're not history guys; we're just guys that admire each other's countries here. But it is interesting that you had the Pax Britana era of peace and the naval dominance, especially of the Royal Navy, that made worldwide trade as we know it now, the building blocks of that. The Americans been a little different. It's been more economic, of course, militarily in World War II, and we, the Marshall Plan and reset the world order, and then the Cold War. It really is amazing that these two countries, for the last, 350 years, this has been the dominance of the Western part of the world.
It is, and I think it's probably language plays a lot of part in that, because there's always that shared language, and obviously a lot of so it is quite unique. Obviously, as you know, a lot of your founding fathers, they took from British ideals, French ones as well, but there was a lot of British ideals there, and the Anglo-Saxon sort of way of doing things is very well known. So how does
the British folks view, we make a big deal out of Independence Day, obviously. Technology is such now with Twitter that, they're probably more aware of it and think about it more than they maybe did 10, 15 years ago. Is it just kind of a funny thing? How's it viewed when we really have our Independence Day? There's some good-natured joshing, of course, about it. But what is the view of our Independence Day for over there?
I think, aside from the good-natured jokes, I think it's become more of a thing here than it used to be, probably because of social media. I mean, Black Friday, for example, is a good example. Black Friday, even when I was growing up, so talking, 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, Black Friday was not really a thing, whereas it very much is now. Maybe not as much as it is in the US, but it is a thing now. And I think it's social media down to that. And I think that's the same Independence Day. We do get a certain level of Independence Day stuff here. Not much, but we do get a bit of Independence Day things. And obviously there's always the jokes, but you'd be better off if you surrounded the Queen, that sort of thing. So I think it's social media has brought us together a little bit. And we increasingly, you're getting our trends and we're getting your trends.
It's so fascinating. I was talking to another friend of ours online the other day, and there's kind of this running joke that America doesn't have a singular culture that it exports to the rest of the world. And I was like, well, that's interesting because the rest of the world sure does copy a lot of it and complain about it a lot. So there must be some kind of American culture. What do you see it, especially in England, where there's the common language, there's the history, there's a lot of overlap there, obviously, when it comes to social media because we can actually talk to each other because there's no language barrier.
Mm.
What is the American culture creep in England? You just mentioned that we're crossing cultures some. What's some of the obvious examples that you see over there that we probably don't think about?
Well, I think the main one is politically. There's a political culture crossover, and a lot of Brits get really arsy about this, and they start going and rants about the American Empire and stuff. But this isn't something America is doing consciously. But we do get a lot of American cultural wars do tend to transport themselves here. I may have actually said this a year ago, but I remember when the Black Lives Matter protests were happening, we were getting similar things here about the police, even though the police in the UK is totally different to policing in the US. We don't really get police officers killing civilians. It just doesn't happen at all. I know it happens in the US, depending on the situation, it happens a fair bit, but it just doesn't happen at all. Where even then, during the protests, people were still acting as if the police here were killing people every day. That just doesn't, and to a certain extent the race stuff as well, even though again it's a different history. Now it's not saying we're better or worse, but there is a different history there, and I don't think that's being taken into account.
Let's talk media too, though. The British press has always had their own flavor of doing things, but I've seen a lot of cross pollination there lately. Our press has gotten, especially the tabloidish British media. We see a lot more that, our TMZ and things like that are kind of more of that model than traditionally. And I've seen kind of the political media, we're having an explosion, a lot of alternative networks, a lot of alternative news sites in British media. That's more of an American influence, I think. I think even in the straight news world, and of course the BBC is partially publicly owned over there, so we need to get that out of the way. So the competition's a little different than in America.
Yeah.
But I think there's some very clear examples there of cross pollinations of culture when it comes, especially to the political media and how they're covering things, because it is a global media thing now.
Yeah, the one thing I've noticed actually in the last 5 years, especially, is the rise of what I would call the monologue. And personally, I don't like the monologue at all. I can't stand it. But you could do a monologue for 10 minutes, and I could agree with every single word of it. I still wouldn't like it because people giving these monologues are just broadcasters, and to us, I couldn't care less what they think, left or right or centre or wherever. But that's one of the big things I've noticed is we're getting a lot of monologues now, where these broadcasters will sort of read these scripts and they'll give this monologue, which I didn't notice. And obviously, it's sort of was it Bill O'Reilly that did it? Used to do it on Fox. Somebody used to do it on Fox, and it used to be well known for it. We've been getting that, and I think also we've been getting from Australia as well. So I think Sky News Australia, they own now, some of the media here, so it's sort of come across that way as well, not just from US, from Australia as well.
Yeah, it was funny because we work with our Young Voices friends. They have a UK branch, and I started getting media requests, and they're like, "Hey, can you do Talk TV in Britain?" And I'm like, "What's that? I've never even heard of it." And then you have Talk TV, Talk Radio. GB News has started up now. It's not just BBC and Sky News and Times Radio, which I've done Times Radio a few times now, which is exceptional. People don't realize the Times is the biggest newspaper in the world for the English language.
Well, Times Radio is also new.
Yeah,
Times Radio is actually quite new. The Times obviously isn't, but Times Radio is new. Yeah,
but that's a huge change. I mean, that would be like the New York Times here having its own media outlets, which they kind of do, but not to that level. Times Radio is a big deal over there. And it's very interesting watching. This is all in the last 3, 4, 5 years, watching these media companies, these legacy news people. I think they figured out to turn the corner in British media of, okay, we've got to go digital. We've got to go multi-platform, just like the rest of the world. It's really been, you take something like the Sunday Times. I don't know how long it's been in print, hundreds of years. That's a pretty remarkable culture shift change for them, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it is probably partially to do with since Brexit, there's been an explosion in sort of interest among regular people in politics. I've noticed it just from people I know who aren't very political, who are now more political and more aware of what's going on, or sort of they get more information because there is, I guess it's infotainment, isn't it? Infotainment is becoming a big thing over here. It wasn't 10, 15 years ago, but it very much is now. And obviously the newspapers have to adapt to that. Because obviously, unlike in the US, sort of the newspapers are the national newspapers which we get. Who they back in an election is a very big deal. it's traditionally seen there who the Sun, for example, when they back someone, that's seen as a really big deal. And I don't think you have that in the US, where the newspapers still hold such a big hold over public opinion. Although, of course, the endorsements from the newspapers is sort of lessening in importance nowadays because, as you say, social media is becoming all important.
No, and to the point, I actually wrote a piece about it when it happened. The New York Times did this multi-day reveal of who their endorsement was going to be, which is as close to a national paper as America has. It's, them and the Washington Post, pretty much. All due respect to everybody else. They had this big reveal of who they were going to endorse, and the elevator lady, who's the security lady in the elevator, gushing over Biden, became the viral story of the whole thing and completely washed out the endorsement of the New York Times. That was the story, and it's such a microcosm of how media works now that. And they did this gimmicky thing where they picked Elizabeth Warren and Gillibrand. They're like, well, may the best woman. They kind of bailed out. They didn't stick the landing in picking their endorsee.
Yeah.
But the viral moment was the real life, closer to the working class woman in the elevator talking to Joe Biden. And it turned out to be, kind of prophetic in how the campaign goes. So to your point, yeah, it's very, very different here. We almost roll our eyes at newspaper endorsements anymore because they're just not, because everything's digital media. Y'all kind of backwards where it's just now catching up to digital media, but you can see a trend that way. I wonder if it's this is just me spitballing a little bit, but I've got to think because news media is a business, right? And you've probably seen this working around Parliament a lot because you see when they set up on the green across the street, you know something's going on, right? There's no way they didn't look at the coverage and the clicks and the ratings for Brexit and go, this has been a lot of money for the last 2-3 years. We should figure out a way to keep this money train going. I think Brexit was an eye-opening moment to them on how they're going to cover things business model-wise going forward. It's got to be because they got great ratings for it because everybody was engaged in it. The whole country was very engaged in it. And when that goes away, your ratings go down. I think that has to be part of the media environment now in England, doesn't it?
Well, I agree. I think one thing Brexit did do, it was the case for both Remain and Leave. I supported Leave, but I wasn't, I vote Leave again, but I'm not like a 100% diehard Leaver, no matter what. But the one thing about Brexit was it did highlight the culture side of things. Although the campaign itself was quite a policy one, certainly in the aftermath, it's pretty clear that there's a Remain Britain and a Leave Britain, which actually has separate ideals on things, which actually have nothing to do with the EU. I mean, there are people who probably are actually ambivalent towards the EU, but are staunch Remainers because of what they feel that culture represents, and likewise for the Leavers. So, and I think media has tried to capitalise on that, and they've sort of seen, well, this is where it's going now. Nowadays, people, I feel like nowadays, there's a lower ceiling, but also a higher floor for a politician's support. I feel like it's a lot less inflexible now than it used to be because of cultural wars. People are just going to back their side no matter what, and they picked a side and they follow it like I do a football team. It's very similar to that. At least I feel like, as a sports fan, it feels very similar to how I back my teams. It's this very tribal, well, I'll back on no matter what sort of thing.
Yeah, and let's not get into football and backing teams. We'll be here all day. Ben Harris, our good friend over in the UK, continuing the tradition of talking to, or as they call it, 0 for 2 day over yonder, American Independence Day, talking to our British friend. We joke about it. One of the great honors in my life, though, and I've got this on my mind because Woody Williams just died. That's the last Medal of Honor recipient from World War II generation for the American side. I
saw that, yeah.
I remember I was, and it just happened by accident, I was in London for the 60th anniversary of D-Day. And I was actually, on the HMS Belfast. They were actually filming a documentary on the fantail of the ship. I got to meet some of the British veterans of that just one of the real honors of my life. I'm just saying, sitting and talking to these guys because they were all queued up to go do interviews and things. And just by happenstance, I got to talk to them. That generation's almost gone. We're very aware of it in America, of course. Same thing in England. That generation is just about gone. I don't know what the numbers there are. We're down into the low 100,000s and dwindling quickly. Is there a sense in England as well? Because that's kind of the last war we really fought together. Not that we weren't in, Afghanistan and Iraq and other parts of the world, but that's the one everybody thinks about, is us coming to World War II, Britain standing alone, and then American came alongside. That's just a big part of the mythology for both of our countries. Is there a danger of that sliding into history a little bit with that generation passing away? Is there an understanding of like, this is a tidal shift, that this generation is almost gone and we're just going to read about them? We're not going to be able to talk to them anymore.
I don't think the special relationship, or whatever you want to call the US-UK relationship, will change much in relation to that. But for one thing, I do feel the one thing that will be the big change is, and hopefully it's not for a few years yet, is when the Queen dies, because that will be, she is seen as sort of the last remaining sort of, she actually did serve in World War II to an extent as a mechanic, I think, as a volunteer mechanic. So, and she is seen as sort of the last remaining holdover from that time. So I think when she does go, that will be and more than anything else, a big thing, because it will signal a sort of change of the guard. And like you said, it's the numbers are quickly dwindling. It's I think to have served in World War II now, you have to be close to 100 at least now. I mean, you're getting to that point now. So it's unfortunately that's a bit of history we're losing. But I think it's the World War II, because it's seen as the last good war, that is still in people's minds. And I think even people who don't even have any family they spoke to who served in the war, so people who don't even have grandparents who are old enough to have served in it. I do think that it still is very much alive today, because we do learn about it a lot in school. It is driven to us a lot. Winston Churchill and sort of the mythology around Britain in World War II is a big thing here still. So I don't think that we will lose that talking point. I think that'll always be there, because I know you guys also have a similar. You see World War II as the last good war as well, and it's Korea is forgotten, Vietnam is sort of seen as the bad war, and it's very similar over here in terms of how you see the war, World War II. So I don't think we're going to lose much. Lose much in terms of how we communicate with each other. But of course, the experiences that the first-hand experiences, that we lose will be impossible to value.
Yeah, it's interesting because just in my lifetime, I'm not that old. I just turned 42. When I was a kid, if you saw any elderly man, you basically assumed they were a World War II vet. That's how, you just assumed it. And now they're almost all gone just in the last 30, 40 years. It's just the way time works. It's a really fascinating thing. Ben Harris, our good friend over in England, we're going to keep talking to him about England, about America, the special relationship, a little politics too, just because he runs amongst the halls of Parliament. So he's got all the good scuttlebutt. We'll touch in on that. We'll continue with our friend Ben Harris, his Independence Day edition of Heard Tell right after. We're back on Heard Tell. Ben Harris, our good friend over in the UK. Been talking just a little bit of history, our shared countries on this Independence Day in America. You do work around Parliament and in the halls of Parliament. So let's talk UK politics for just a second. Just an outside observer, we've been talking to our UK friends a lot lately because there's a lot of news on it. I'm just going to make the general statement. On the outside looking in, neither Prime Minister Johnson nor the Right Honorable Opposition in the form of Sir Keir Starmer and the Labour, neither one of these individuals are exactly covering themselves in glory right now. This seems to be just kind of like y'all kind of muddling through a down period where it's like, well, Johnson's not great, but he's kind of Teflon and there's nobody else. So we're kind of stuck with him, and Starmer's got his own problem. This kind of seems just like a little bit of malaise, this current period in UK politics. Does it feel that way there?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's not just the leaders. I mean, to be fair, he's a big improvement on Corbyn. I'll give him that, but he's very much failing to inspire people. And of course, Boris Johnson has so many personal. Yeah, it is. And then Boris Johnson, of course, has so many personal issues. His problems aren't really policy-wise. They're mainly just in getting things done in government, because the government, it just feels so dysfunctional. And two, it's his personal life, which just keeps on intruding onto the job. But it's not just that; it's also the MPs in general. There are a lot of MPs who it's becoming clear should not be MPs. I mean, my boss is great. I always pick up for him. He's been an excellent boss. But there are lots of MPs who they just, with all the scandals we've had recently, both sides, they're just not a cut for it, and they just all they seem to do is just focus on their sort of pointless social media stuff, and they'll get up in the chamber and they'll give a speech about something, and they'll just blare out loads of inaccuracies, and once again, it's just for social media. It's not actually for anything else.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're talking about cross-cultural stuff. We got the same problem here. We just had our buddy Eric Garcia on, who covers Congress for the Independent, of all things. And he talks about it, and we talked about it on the show. It's like, there's basically two kinds of Congress people and U.S. senators here, because we have a bicameral House. House of Lords is a different beast for y'all. So basically, it's Parliament. You have two kinds of people. You have the people that are there and they do the show and they do the fundraising. And then you have a very small cadre of people who actually do the deals and know people and get things done and make the deals and move legislation. It's interesting that you're saying that, because we have the same problem here. Is kind of the media superstar Congress people. When you talk to the reporters and when legislation goes through and you start looking at the headlines of who actually wrote it, it's almost always two different sets of people. And we've seen that here too. And I think it's social media, because we have the social media superstars who play the public media part of politics, and then you still got the old school ones who go and they actually do the job. It's funny. It just seems to be universal in parliamentary politics, doesn't it?
Well, what would say actually is that I think that doesn't have as much effectiveness of how systems work. I know that in the US, the party line is nowhere near as strong as it is here. Here, if you're an MP, you've got to vote with the government on pretty much everything, and if you don't, that you're in big trouble. Whereas I know that there, representatives and especially senators do get a bit more independence. So here it's they'll do the social media stuff, but they'll still vote with the government anyway. So it's just I don't think we get as much of a slowdown in government as you would there. But it does slow things down. It does prevent problems from being resolved. Yeah,
it's interesting just how the systems work, because there's good and bad to that we have weaker parties. We all have a two-party system, but you got to remind people, but it's there. It's a great example of this was I was doing some British media when the Uvalde shooting happened, and they're interviewing you because they want the American, and you have to just kind of slow walk them through. It's like with something like gun legislation, which we passed something that was, kind of a middling piece of legislation, but you have to slow walk a UK audience through it because it's so different. It's like, no, Congress can't just pass a law. It's not like Parliament, where with a few legal exceptions, pretty much whatever Parliament says go. Like, that's not how it works here. Like, even if you got it through, there's still judicial review. There's still the executive branch. Like, Congress can't just pass something that's a constitutional amendment through law. And I'm just using that as the example of, it's a whole different mindset when you have Parliament. Something like Brexit could never happen in America, because you'd never get it through, and then it would be tied up in the Supreme Court for 30 years. And y'all got it done in a relatively short period. And you had it through in a relatively short period of time. It's just a very, very different system.
It is. But obviously Brexit, we almost didn't get through. And I mean, that really did push it to the breaking point. I remember 2019, 2018, sort of around that time, it was absolute chaos. We had all sorts of norms being busted. And in fairness to Boris Johnson, he's not done much yet, but he did manage to put through. But even that was only done through an election. It was essentially a sum. But it can be easier to get things done, because obviously we don't have the state government. I mean, counties here, which are equivalent to your state, counties are basically, they don't have much control over anything. Certainly you can't have different abortion laws between counties, for example.
Yeah, and that's going to be a mess for the rest of the year, but let's leave that for another day. All right, Ben Harris, our good friend over in the UK. All right, real quick, the minute we got left here, let folks know where to follow you on social media, because I love following you, even though you hate garlic, which is, a major character flaw, but we'll deal with that another. But one quick story from you on why you love America so much, even though you are a Brit, and despite it all, you're a Baltimore Orioles fan for some odd reason I'll never understand. But let people know your social media and tell them, just for our Independence Day, why you love our America so very, very much.
Well, I don't know really. I guess I've always consumed American culture since I was a kid, like most people do. I think there's something about that more individualistic mindset that Americans have, which I really have always been drawn to. And they say here, everything is bigger in America, and there is just so much there when it comes to sort of the land, the people. It's a lot of Brits are quite bitter towards America, but I don't see it that way. I mean, the way I see it, someone's got to do, the world. If it's not us, then it's better than you guys than anyone else. So.
And speaking of which, we got to get you over here soon for a visit, my friend.
Oh, I would love to. I'd love to come over. West Virginia's on my list. I plan to visit every state. I've done 8 so far, I think, in my life. So plus DC. So yeah, I will visit West Virginia someday and North Carolina. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, it's a great place. We'll be happy to host you. Don't get a whole lot of Brits there, so you'll be very popular. I promise you. Ben Harris, our good friend over in the UK, the special relationship, our friends over in England, from whence we came. It just took us 2 wars and a couple of years to forgive everybody about it, but we're good friends now. Ben Harris, thank you so much for your time today, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. Back to Her Tell. 4th of July is a good time to bring up this story. CNN, a letter written by Alexander Hamilton, one of America's founding fathers. Yes, that's what he actually did before he became a musical. He was a real guy, for those of you from Logan. Thought lost for decades is finally going on display at the Commonwealth Museum in Massachusetts. Written by Hamilton in 1780 to the Marquis de Lafayette, the letter is believed to have been stolen from the Massachusetts State Archive during World War II, according to the news release from William Francis Galvin, Secretary to the Commonwealth. Hamilton, who was then the captain of the New York Artillery Company and sent the letter during the end of the Revolutionary War. Lafayette, of course, was a French aristocrat who was aiding the Americans in the fight against the British. In the letter, Hamilton warned Lafayette of enemy forces coming to Rhode Island and endangering French troops. An archive employee who stole the letter was arrested in 1950 and found to have sold it along with other documents to rare book dealers, according to the Massachusetts court filing. But in November of 2018, the letter emerged at an auction house in Alexandria, Virginia, before coming into custody of the FBI the following year. If you really, really liked National Treasure, this is some real life stuff here. The Commonwealth Museum, back to CNN. 4th of July exhibit is the first opportunity the public will have to see the letter since it was returned to Massachusetts. The news release said the exhibit also includes original documents from the 18th century, like a letter from John Hancock to the Massachusetts Assembly announcing independence from Great Britain, and a letter from George Washington to the Massachusetts General Court, copy of the Declaration of Independence. Hamilton has gained renewed attention in recent years because of the pop culture icon due to the massive popularity of the Broadway musical. Trust me, my one kid listened to that thing on a loop for weeks. I know all about it. Anyway, cool 4th of July story. Alexander Hamilton. No, I'm not going to sing about it. His letter is for display in Massachusetts. If you're up there, make sure you go check that out. You can also see it online. They have a digitized copy of it. Cool piece of history. More Her Tell on this 4th of July right after this.